Ted Kennedy, the last of a band of brothers who changed America.
For his family, he was a guardian. For America, he was a defender of a dream.
Some say Kennedy had all the virtues and the vices of his privileged family, but in tributes today, he's been remembered as a man who spent his life fighting for the poor and the dispossessed.
Also on News at 10, an invitation to a football riot, how gangs organised last night's violence at West Ham. Reality bites for Big Brother as the show's cancelled because of falling ratings. And
thank you for coming, Mr. Ali. Thank you very much.
The greatest comes to town. Muhammad Ali visits Manchester.
Good evening. The current keeper of the American dream, President Obama, today paid tribute to the man he called the defender of that dream, the distinguished Senator Edward Kennedy. Senator Kennedy died last night from brain cancer, the last of three brothers who made up a once powerful political dynasty. He didn't manage to follow in the presidential footsteps of his assassinated brother John F. Kennedy, but in the final years of life, he was determined Barack Obama would bring the kind of change to America that JFK had embodied and for which he himself had worked so hard. From the Kennedy compound in Massachusetts, Martin Geisler reports.
In the house where he grew up and grew into a political dynasty, America's liberal lion lost his toughest fight last night. Brain cancer ending Edward Kennedy's extraordinary life of achievement, tragedy and scandal. The States woke to the news this morning. The reaction, sadness rather than shock. The diagnosis 15 months ago had been bleak. President Obama led the tributes to an old friend. His deputy and one of his predecessors were quick to follow.
Over the past several years, I've had the honor to call Teddy a colleague, a counselor, and a friend. And even though we have known this day was coming for some time now, we awaited it with no small amount of dread.
Today, we lost a truly remarkable man. To paraphrase Shakespeare, I don't think we shall ever see his like again.
His legacy, his commitment, the resonance of the speeches he made, his dedication over a lifetime will be remembered by his peers in the Senate.
How insulting can you be? Make that argument on the floor of the United States Senate.
Teddy Kennedy was one of those figures who'd been around so long no one imagined life without him, so the people of the States did much of their mourning when his cancer was diagnosed. It came right in the middle of the campaign to select the Democrats' presidential candidate. His commitment to the cause kept him working in support of the man he'd endorsed just a few months before.
It's time again for a new generation of leadership. It is time now for Barack Obama.
His role as kingmaker complete. He attended President Obama's inauguration. He looked happy, but the cancer which was killing him got the better of him that day. He collapsed, rushed to hospital from Capitol Hill. But still, that didn't stop him fighting for the issues closest to his heart. Healthcare was one, and just last week he signed a letter appealing to the Scottish government not to release the Lockerbie bomber. Central to Ted Kennedy's appeal was his ability to connect with everyday people. He may have been a fabulously wealthy member of the world's most famous political dynasty, but he devoted his life to fighting for the man on the street. That was appreciated right across the political divide, right across the United States, but nowhere more so than here in Hyannis Port, where the Kennedys have had their base since the 1920s.
I just love them very much, and my heart is broken, you know.
Sad day, definitely a sad day. An era lost to this little community where once the helicopters used to drop in right here and the president would get out and we'd all have a lot of fun.
In the words of one tribute today, the Liberal lion's roar has now fallen silent, but the memories, like his dreams, will never die.
The death of Senator Kennedy closes a chapter in American history about a fabled family whose members rose to the pinnacle of political power. Ted Kennedy, of course, never matched the achievement of his brother JFK. The scandal surrounding a car crash sorted that. But in the lifetime of public service that followed, he dedicated himself to improving the lives of millions of poor Americans. Juliet Bremner looks at his life and legacy.
Born into a life of money and privilege, this was a dynasty defined by a band of brothers, which established the Kennedys as one of America's most famous families. Edward Moore Kennedy, or Teddy to his family, was the youngest of 4 brothers. He lived much of his early life in their shadow, only taking to the political stage himself in 1962, when he became the youngest senator ever. But the Kennedy curse would soon strike. Just a year later, his brother, President John F. Kennedy, was assassinated. And then, within 5 years, he'd lost his only surviving brother, Robert.
A decent man who saw wrong and tried to right it, saw suffering and tried to heal it, saw war and tried to stop it.
All the family hopes now rested on Edward's shoulders. But the Chappaquiddick incident would blight his political aspirations. In 1969, he drove his car off a bridge at Chappaquiddick, near his home. He escaped, but his passenger, Mary Jo Kopechne, drowned. He was given a 2-month suspended sentence for leaving the scene, but it was to thwart his ambitions for the highest office.
I think the first thing it did was ensure that he would never be president. I don't think he understood how severely that had damaged his standing.
Although he went on to challenge Jimmy Carter for the Democratic nomination in 1980, he did finally accept this was never to be his fate.
I know that this decision means that I may never be president, but the pursuit of the presidency is not my life. Public service is.
The rest of his political life would be spent as a senator, a champion of liberal reform.
America deserves better. This issue is too important.
A staunch supporter of Irish Republicans, sticking to his beliefs even when it brought accusations that he was a friend of terrorists. He wasn't afraid to cross the political divide, teaming up with the Republicans to ensure legislation on healthcare, civil rights and education was passed.
He is a fabulous United States Senator. When he's against you, it's tough. When he's with you, it is a great experience.
But he could be a fierce critic, scoring points over the technique known as waterboarding, used against Iraqi prisoners.
Would waterboarding be torture if it was done to you?
I would feel that it was.
A Democratic icon, one of his last acts was to endorse the new president, the man he saw as the future of his beloved country. Juliet Bremner, News at 10.
Well, to Martin Geiser now, who's outside the Kennedy family home in Hyannis Port. Martin, the plans for the senator's funeral have been announced.
Well, yes, no precise time frame as yet, but most of the details have been confirmed. It seems Senator Kennedy's body will be taken in a motorcade from the compound here to the John F. Kennedy Library in Boston, where he will lie in state, or lie in repose, to use the correct terminology, given he was never a president. There will be a funeral mass after that at the Basilica in Boston, and he'll be taken from there to Arlington National Cemetery, where he'll be laid to rest alongside his brothers Robert and John F. Kennedy. I think those arrangements speak for themselves. The scale, but also the fact that it's been deemed necessary that ordinary Americans should be given the opportunity to line up, file past his body and pay their last respects. That was a mark of the man, and the funeral service won't be the only one held in his memory. There'll be events here in his beloved hometown and right across the states.
OK, Martin, thank you.
The ugly violence inside and outside West Ham Stadium last night now appears to have been planned in advance by hooligans looking for a fight. The police were concerned there might be trouble at the cup match against Millwall and thought their plans would be enough to deal with it. They weren't, and today there have been questions as to why.